One. Spags free agency might be winding down, but we still have some interesting moves happening in the NFL.
Yeah, DeVante Parker going to the Patriots, a rare interdivision trade going on. So we're going to talk about the fantasy ramifications for both sides of that one. We also got a little Frank Gore guessing game coming up here. The ageless one is retiring. Can I guess all of his headshots, or can you? We'll find out in a little bit after this intro. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Splash Play, the fantasy football podcast for every game under the sun. And once again, I am Chris Spags, joined by your friend of mine, Pete, over at Pete. How are you doing? And really vivid 4K video right now for all the folks on YouTube.
Yeah, I've been in the lab working with my buddy Jordan to improve my YouTube streaming setup, and I finally got the camera. I have actually moved on from the webcam, although there is something that I am going to experiment with here, and I could try it right now. Here you go. Watch this. I could do a little of this, give you a little alternate angle there if I want. So yeah, I got to get more familiar with that, but we're stepping things up here.
The more Pete's, the merrier. I hope.
I know it doesn't. I think it'd actually be good if it replaced, it actually swapped, but just having both of them at the same time is pretty disconcerting.
Peter Overzet from All Angles, your new 1 hour set exclusively on YouTube. But make sure you are subscribed to Pete's channel as well as the Splash Play channel. Next week, looks like we'll have at least one of our first clips coming out with a little USFL preview we'll be doing on this show that's going to be ported out. But the point is, we're going to be putting content on both Pete's channel with the live stream, Splash Play channel, and some of the live streams, as well as the short form clips, segments really from each show, chopped up, meant to kind of reach people with, and really just give people a chance like you guys out there. You can't watch a whole hour show, hour and a half show. You jump right to the stuff that matters. So go subscribe to both channels, get on board now, and of course, like the videos on both channels because it helps us out a bunch, helps us beat that YouTube algorithm that is so important out there. Also, make sure you're going over to footballoutsiders.com/subscribe. Lots of great patches over for FO Plus, but also on the homepage, even if you don't want to subscribe, check out the articles. The guys are really grinding all offseason long, even though the free agency portion of things has slowed down. They're giving their best takes, retroactive looks at things that popped out from last season, looking forward as much as possible. USFL previews are a little bit of something for everybody over at Football Outsiders. So go over to the homepage, go check it out. And if you want to subscribe at footballoutsiders.com/subscribe, feel free to go do that right now. But Pete, let's talk about some of this NFL news because we do have one interesting move that did happen as we talked about in the intro. DeVante Parker traded to the Patriots. 2022 fifth-round draft pick was also included with that in exchange for a 2023 third-round pick. And I guess the first thing would feel like DeVante Parker, certainly a guy who's shown some upside in the past, feels like a low draft capital, but it is a spot, Pete, where I guess the Dolphins, the Patriots got just enough to justify a move where for a guy who really probably didn't fit in with the Cedric Wilson and Tyreek Hill acquisitions for the Dolphins.
Yeah, it actually seemed like kind of a classic Patriots move where, they've historically been pretty good with those deep draft picks and kind of moving back, adding assets, and then just moving back a couple rounds in the draft. So they lose a 2-round difference, right? Going from a third to a fifth, and then they pick up, DeVante Parker. So I guess you could, I don't know the implications, inside and out, but that seems like relatively fair to me for a DeVante Parker, that 2-round difference. I think once you get in that range of the draft anyways, especially if they project it to be a little bit later in the third round, then, you're starting to get into real dart throw range there anyway. So yeah, I don't mind it for them. It definitely signals the end of the N'Keal Harry experiment. He was the guy they drafted to, be that big bodied wide receiver on the outside. So I think it fits in well with what they're doing. They've showed that they can't properly scout wide receivers from, a draft prospect. So at least identifying guys where what you're getting with DeVante Parker at this point in his career. And I think he fits in well with what they're trying to do.
He's been a guy who's been efficient enough with volume, has shown the ability to get downfield as well, even though you kind of make the case in that Dolphins offense. Preston Williams really didn't get much different results, and he was certainly is a guy that's not being treated as anybody worth trading for, though he is coming back to the Dolphins, supposedly. We'll see if he makes it through training camp. But I'm with you. I feel like this is an upgrade for the Patriots. The one thing I would say fantasy-wise, like if you're drafting, and I feel like, we've done a lot of drafts on this show, the Superflex Best Balls over at Underdog, where you use that promo code SPLASH as well if you want to get your deposit doubled up to $100. Go do that right now because we have a lot of fun doing those drafts. You don't see a lot of Patriots stacks going overall on the underdog best ball drafts. I'm sure the same for the other best ball leagues out there that are being drafted right now. But I feel like really, unless this offense changes materially, Pete, for the Patriots, it feels like having DeVante Parker in probably going to be a downgrade for Jacoby Myers in the middle of the field. It's going to be a downgrade for Kendrick Bourne, who wasn't running enough routes anyway last year to be sustainable. This year, him coming back in, unless there's a big jump or a big shift around, like cutting a Nelson Aguilar or something like that, I feel like it's tough to see him being a useful part as well. Same thing for Hunter Henry, same thing for Jonnu Smith. I feel like the Patriots seem like what they know, what they have in Mac Jones, and it seems like for the most part, barring a gigantic leap for him, it feels like they're just going to run the ball and not have a ton of volume going to any of these receivers.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I was on the clock in one of my super flex drafts. I was seeing if I could pull it up here. Yes, I found it where I had Mac Jones, and Mac Jones has been a little tough to kind of stack with in this format. And so, his ADP, DeVante Parker, was sitting there at 204. This obviously hasn't updated yet since he was traded, and I went ahead and took him there at pick 175 because I had already had Mac Jones on this team. So I'm definitely comfortable with him in this round, where I got him in the 15th. Is that where I got him? Yeah, in the 15th. So Kendrick Bourne, goes a few picks before, and I'm perfectly happy to get Parker there. And my guess would be Parker, ends up jumping a couple rounds and ends up settling around the same ADP as Jacoby Myers, would just be about my guess.
He does feel like a pretty clear-cut wide receiver one, especially because Jacoby Myers is mostly exclusively running out of the slot. So I think that's 1A and 1B, or maybe 1 and 2, depending upon how you feel about Jacoby Myers. Josh in the chat saying this has hurt Hunter Henry, though, less touchdown upside. I feel like anybody that can actually catch passes in that offense is going to hurt just everybody else who was kind of left behind, simply because they don't want to throw the ball. And I think, that Buffalo game, certainly one that crystallized that. And it is a rookie Mac Jones, the jump we talk about a lot on this show, the jump for really any skill position player, year 1 to year 2, year 2 to year 3 is going to be the biggest jumps they potentially have. So if Mac Jones comes in, they're willing to get closer to a 50-50 run pass split. But last year, definitely seemed like Bill Belichick is comfortable letting the defense do the work. Find it hard to believe they have lost some guys on that defense, even though, as we all know, defense doesn't matter that much, but still losing talent. Maybe they have to rely a little more on the pass game. But I just don't have the confidence there. And I agree with what you're doing on underdog. Like, yeah, take DeVante Parker. He's probably undervalued as a go-to target potentially for Mac Jones. But what's it really worth to be a go-to target for Mac Jones? I don't really know. And I thought the tweets were kind of funny, Pete, as well, just to touch on them real fast. And Mac Jones tweeted, "Let's go." And then DeVante Parker replied, "Let's get it, big dog." It's one of those replies you make where it's like, oh, cool, I'm going to this new job with a guy who, I don't know anything about. You got to make the best of it. So I got to respect DeVante Parker on that front. But if you're DeVante Parker, you can't be that stoked heading in to have Mac Jones throw you the ball around.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's a pretty good dichotomy of the second year quarterback who still has not been jaded. He's not sick of, going to training camps. And DeVante Parker's like, bud, I'm just going to cash another check. Just relax a little bit.
Yeah, I'm happy to not to change divisions. He doesn't have to get confused in interviews. That's probably the main benefit for DeVante Parker. And for the Dolphins, Pete, feels like overall just one less body in the mix, one less guy who could grouse and actually, have a viable case to say, I should continue getting my 7 to 10 targets that he's been getting historically, as a Dolphins pass catcher. But, it is Tyreek Hill in the mix. It's Cedric Wilson they paid a pretty big deal for. You still have Mike Gesicki there, maybe improving a little bit more. There's enough weapons for the Dolphins right now. And Chase Edmonds, we've talked about a lot on this show, a guy who can catch some passes. Raheem Mostert in the backfield too, probably more of a traditional, through the tackles back with some speed, but still a guy that could, theoretically get a few check down passes here and there. It just feels like overall, this move had to happen just to get Tyreek the volume that he needs to be remotely useful.
Yeah, and I feel like it makes sense too in the ways, what's the phrase the draft nets use? How does this guy win? I mean, DeVante Parker wins down the field, contested catches, deep ball stuff. And they've basically retailored their offense around Tua. And they're like, we want to have all these quick hitters, use Waddle and Tyreek Hill underneath. We know Tua is really efficient in the short areas. They haven't really shown what he can do, if he can even do it, pushing the ball down the field. So to me, this makes sense. It's like they are tailing their offense around Tua's skill set. And then in that context, Parker becomes a little bit expendable. And not to mention, they're kind of ushering in a bit of a youth movement as well. So I think it all completely checks out that Parker was on the outs with this new look Dolphins team.
No, it makes a lot of sense. Actually, that's one way I didn't think about it. Tyreek's certainly a great deep ball guy, as we've seen in Kansas City, but also a guy that if you just give him the ball in space, he's going to be able to make long plays anyway. So it does kind of fit the ethos of what you think Mike McDaniel will bring based on that San Francisco offense we've seen the last few years. One other free agency item, Pete, which is not a big one at all, and I wouldn't even expect that you've even seen this one because I didn't see it in the Fantasy Life newsletter that I, of course, check religiously in the hopes that we have got anything we could talk at all on the show. Marlon Mack signed with the Texans, and I think that's kind of interesting because here's a question for you, Pete. How old do you think Marlon Mack is?
Man, my guess is you're setting me up to say he's much older than he actually is. Like my guess would be he's like 27 and he's probably actually like 24.
He's actually 26, but just turned 26. So he was a hot off the press is 26. I thought you'd be like, he's like 29 or 30, and you go like, he's old, he's dusty.
Yeah.
He's not old and dusty. Like he's coming off an injury. He lost his job to Jonathan Taylor. I think that he's the kind of guy in best ball where you have these 20-round drafts now on underdog. Like I would take a flyer on Marlon Mack late there if you're going with a 0 RB build or you just feel bad about the backs that you have there. Because it seems to me like last year, like we saw Royce Freeman get carries. We saw Rex Burkhead, who I think is expected to be back this year. Like he got a ton of work down the stretch. David Johnson, we know, has been there with a really ugly contract that who knows, he definitely could be a cut, you would think, in training camp, depending how that cap works out. I feel like Marlon Mack, I wouldn't say, a guy, Pete, that I have a ton of confidence in, but there's potential for him to be sneaky in the way that you kind of need one back to be sneaky, at least, for a week here and there in best ball.
Yeah. I don't, is that the type of profile you normally want to invest in? A guy who doesn't catch passes, who's primarily dependent on touchdowns in what we expect to be one of the worst offenses of the league? No. But when you do look at kind of the roster there, and did I miss what Philip Lindsay hasn't been re-signed by them, has he?
I don't think so, no.
I don't think he has either. So that's an interesting one to me because I did think Philip Lindsay was their best pure rusher. But if they don't re-sign Lindsay and they were kind of making the choice to bring in Mack, I mean, then the depth chart behind him doesn't look bad at all. You have, perennial role player Rex Burkhead. You have pass catcher Dare Ngubawale. Royce Freeman profiles more as a pass catcher too. So, I mean, he could be the main guy that's projecting for, 10 to 13 carries a game in that offense. But if Philip Lindsay resigns, then it's such a mess that I don't even think I will be dealing with it whatsoever.
Also, I think you're forgetting Philip Lindsay actually was on the Dolphins at the end of last year. They had gotten rid of him in midseason.
Oh, they did? Yeah. Then there you go. But Philip Lindsay's still a free agent, right? Because he's not on the Dolphins. He's a free agent,
Yeah. He's 27 and he turns 28 in July, which feels wrong to me too.
Yeah, and he was because he was older coming out of Colorado. He was a 4-year guy. But yeah, I guess like if this depth chart holds, Marlon Mack is vaguely interesting as a volume standpoint, but he, perfectly falls into that category too of just don't, draft him based on projected volume before the draft, because could the Texans take a young running back? I mean, you could probably argue that they should. And in which case Marlon Mack then becomes basically undraftable if they use any draft capital whatsoever on a running back.
No, that's a good point. Certainly, perhaps a Mike Davis effect potentially on Marlon Mack, where you just hope that he gets that volume there. But you do have Rex Burkhead there. Sean in the chat saying max ADP could push up. I think if it pushes up to like the 19th round, like I feel like I don't mind taking him there. If you're talking about 10 to 15th round, I think you're probably looking at not great value for Marlon Mack, no matter what the situation. But I have a little more belief in the Texans just getting him better by throwing their chips behind Davis Mills, and hopefully it seems like keeping Brandon Cooks, because it doesn't seem like the trade market for him is that big so far. But we'll see how the draft day goes coming up in a few weeks. And then Colin Kaepernick throwing for scouts in Ann Arbor will be the last news item we have to hit on before we get to the Frank Gore headshot guessing game. And Kaepernick now reportedly willing to accept a backup role. He told ESPN's Josina Anderson. Pete, if you had to place odds on it, Colin Kaepernick ever getting a job in the NFL again, where would you put those odds?
Man, it feels like we've had the same news story with him over and over, where it's like, oh, they're kicking the tires, they bring him in, and then nothing ever materializes. I guess I would set the odds at like unlikely, but not impossible. So I don't know, like plus 750.
I was thinking plus 800.
Okay.
We're really getting good at getting on the same page with these odds. I think that's the one thing the show has going for it. But I'm with you on that. It feels like a low probability chance at this point. Even the Seahawks, like Pete Carroll has talked glowingly to the press about as much as anybody about Colin Kaepernick. And now, as we saw in our Friday show, we are both big believers in Drew Lock. So why would you bring in anybody else? That's your starter. That's the guy you should be building around and letting throw every pass possible to both to Tyler Lockett as well as to DK Metcalf. But it feels like if the Seahawks aren't going to bring in Kaepernick, even as like just a goosing interest in the team at a time where they're probably going to backslide here. I don't know where Kaepernick could go. And I feel like at this point, it's probably better to invest, a little bit of time, a little bit of draft capital on a younger talent. It's one of the spots for Kaepernick. I really wish that he did have the job, but as DFS Texas playing, he hasn't played since 2016 now. It's not looking great for Colin Kaepernick. And it bums me out, but like ultimately he got the payday. He's doing great social justice work. Like at the end of the day, his legacy could be something besides a football player, Pete. And I guess that's got to be a positive too when we talk about it on this show.
Yeah. I mean, you start to worry that he's kind of in the Tebow territory where there's not much actual football, related things to talk about regarding him. But because he's such a lightning rod and because, for a lack of a better word, he brings in clicks and eyeballs and downloads to stories that, the media keeps going back to that well. So I think you got to be a little careful. It's like you hear these stories and it's like, oh, is there actually, a fire here where there's smoke? And it's like, well, they're probably like us, just trying to come up things to talk about and know that Kaepernick will elicit strong emotions out of their viewers.
Look, I very much champion a lot of things as best I can. I believe in a lot of what he did, and I think it's great that he actually, took the lumps to kind of put the messaging out there that he did, even though it was really tough to do that, and certainly not the most well-received message based on the timing and the social climate and all that stuff. And I would like to see him get back, be a backup, get a chance to maybe start down the stretch and have, that storybook ending, at least a better ending than what he has for himself right now. But it just seems unlikely at this point, and you kind of got to feel like if you're Colin Kaepernick, I get what he's doing. I get he wants to keep putting himself out there, but you got the settlement, you got this other work you can do. At a certain point, you just kind of got to call it quits on something, and I feel like that might be the case for this. But Pete, it is about time to talk about the Frank Gore headshot guessing game, where Frank Gore turns 38 in May, is going to sign a one-day contract to retire as a Niner, while also going into their front office, reportedly in the personnel department. And I feel like it's worth touching on real fast Frank Gore's numbers here, because he is kind of an interesting case, Pete, where most consecutive seasons as a running back with over 500 yards rushing, he's got 16 of those. Most consecutive seasons with over 600 yards rushing, he's got 14 of those. Tied for the most consecutive seasons with at least 700 yards rushing, that's 13 for him. He's the first player with 12 consecutive seasons with at least 1,200 yards from scrimmage. Most seasons with 1,200 yards from scrimmage overall, with 12 of those. Tied for the most consecutive seasons with at least 5 touchdowns, 11 of those. He's one of 5 running backs ever with at least 9 1,000-yard rushing seasons, and one of 4 running backs ever with 15,000 career rushing yards. Some noteworthy things, Pete, but he is very much a guy that was just a volume back, a dude that really the durability, the longevity was the main thing for him. Before we get into the headshot guessing game, of course, the ageless Frank Gore, do you have any takes on him and where he stands kind of in the historical fantasy / real life football overview of time?
Yeah, I just think it's insane how he was able to hold up. It's almost even one thing if he had this super long career, but was like in and out, missing a season because of injury. But just, he had that stretch from 2011 to 2016 where he didn't miss a game. We're talking about the most physically unforgiving position in the NFL. And I know we're all like, holy cow, Tom Brady keeps playing. But the amount of wear and tear in the hits that Tom Brady has taken over his career compared to Frank Gore, it's laughably different. Like it's just nowhere in the same realm. And so for his body to hold up like this is just incredible. I'm trying to, you don't want to be too hyperbolic, but thinking through like great feats of human accomplishment, and Frank Gore having this long of a career at the running back position, I feel safe to say we will never see that ever again. And that's with evolution happening and guys getting bigger and faster and stronger and modern medicine and better helmets. Like, I still don't think we will ever see someone at the running back position have this long and successful of a career.
Yeah, I think based on the way the NFL just treats running backs overall, it seems unlikely. It's worth pointing out Football Outsiders actually last year, I think, did an article talking about the Hall of Fame debate around Frank Gore. He only cracked their top 10 in rushing DVOA once in 2012. Was top 10 in defensive yards above replacement 3 times, 2006, 2012, 2014. So really you're looking at a guy where the main skill was that availability, was what Pete's talking about, just being able to do it year after year. And that's something I tend to believe a little bit more, like a guy like Ezekiel Elliott. I know we are on this show is really a fantasy community overall. I think we all talk about Tony Pollard's more and go like, yeah, he's more efficient. He looks better. He's got more burst. Really everything you would look at, it does tend to favor that other back. but sometimes there is a skill in just, being able to handle volume and stay out there on the field. And I feel like that's where Frank Gore really does excel. So you got to give him kudos, but ultimately just one of those guys that was a lot of right time, right place, and certainly some fond fantasy memories, I'm sure, if you ever rostered him in his younger days. But Pete, do you want to introduce the headshot guessing game here, where Pete did a lot of legwork getting this one ready to make me look like an asshole, because there's no way I'm going to get probably any of these right.
Yeah, the problem is so what I did is I went through Frank Gore's career and grabbed headshots and photos throughout it. And I did a good job cropping the photos to make sure you couldn't see, like, oh, this is a jersey. He's clearly on the Bills in this one. However, this was a naming convention disaster by me, because I was trying to avoid naming the files in a way that Spags could kind of identify, or if I had the numbers in correct order. So right now I am you probably see me look slightly distracted as we've been talking, and I've been trying to like rename things in a way that you can't realize, but also then I actually know the correct date. I'm like 75% of the way there. And so we're just going to YOLO it and get these up on the screen. But my thought was I have like 7 or 8 photos, and I was going to have you order them from youngest to oldest. And then assuming I can actually figure out the correct answers, I can reveal that.
All right, so we'll see here. Of course, Frank Gore did go from 2005 until 2020. So we're going to have a pretty broad swath of Frank Gore here. And Pete, I guess if you want to hit me with the first headshot, I'm ready to dive in.
Yeah, so let me get this screen share up here. And these are a mix, I would say, of, actual headshots. There's one from an award ceremony. There is one from games, from practices. So these kind of run the gamut to hopefully keep you on your toes here a bit. We'll get to the shared screen. Let's start with this one right here. We have kind of almost a grimacing Frank Gore here. And I'm obviously going to go through and show you all of these, but do you want to take like a first stab on maybe like the general year that you think this one might be from?
Okay, so I'll just explain my thought process here. So I'm seeing the little bit of blue on him, which does make me think that could be his Buffalo year. He also seems to be a little bit on the older side. That said, the blue does not necessarily, could just be a practice shirt, could be a team uniform or something. There, or even just a jersey that has a weird color for some reason, or maybe Pete really went above and beyond and colored in part of his neck. I don't know, but I will guess, Pete, that this is in fact his 2019 season.
Okay, we will. I won't tip anything off now because I do want you to kind of organize these. But let's go to this one. This is obviously more of a true headshot here, as if you would see on his ESPN page.
So we talked about when he was pretty locked in, and that 2012 year is the one that Football Outsiders talked about where he really popped out in a meaningful way. I feel like you look into this man's eyes right now, you also see less of that, the kind of frown line that we saw in the other photo. So that means to me a younger Frank Gore, a nicely hydrated Frank Gore. I think this is when he started to get the peak of his power. So I'll say this is 2012 Frank Gore.
Okay, we have a guess for 2012 Frank Gore here. Let's head. This is another headshot here, just your standard headshot, but definitely from a different year than this one, if you are able to distinguish between those two. And I mean, the difference here could just be him using a different moisturizer across a span of 10 years. Like that's what we're dealing with right now.
Or a more generous photographer who's like, I'll Photoshop a little bit of him, clean him up a little bit, make him look good.
Yeah.
I think I will take this at face value and feel like, again, he looks a little bit less sure of himself. You could see the eyes looking a little bit sadder. So I think this is probably him a little bit younger. I'll go, this is his 2009 headshot.
Okay, we got 2009 here. Let's head over to this one. This is from an awards, thing, which maybe that's giving away a little too much information, but I wanted to mix up the type of photos in here so we see him outside of, an ESPN mugshot.
So here, and I think based on that big grin, based on the award ceremony, again, we could see the frown line here, not quite as burrowed. I think he looks bright-eyed, youthful. I think this is after his 1,700-yard year in 2006. So I'll say it's 2006, maybe 2007, but I'll go 2006.
Okay. All right. We got a 2006 here. You're gonna have to remember what your guesses are so that I can actually order them. But I'll let you kind of reset. Like once you see them all, if you're exact thing. All right, here's another headshot here.
Okay, so that screams to me, I'm almost on the way out of San Francisco. I'm unhappy. The frown line still not there, so he can't be that old. I think this has got to be around when he turned 30 would be my thought. So again, guy who hydrates very well. I can't tell you guys enough the importance of hydrating to keep youthful skin. People often ask me, hey, Spags, how are you so young looking? And I say, drank 120 ounces of this already, my friend. Frank Gore, I think, well hydrated in 2014 before he ends up going to Indianapolis.
Okay. I just want to say already, this game is going exactly as I hoped would, and
Extremely poorly for me.
yeah, you're all over the map. Here's another, like, me having to do the crop correctly, so you can't see the jersey here. But here's another. This is a practice shot of Frank Gore.
So you're starting to see some whites develop in the hair, which does happen, of course, as we get older. I would say also looks like he's working hard in the sun, and to me, that feels like a Miami year. So I'm going to go 2018.
All right, we got a more contemporary guess here, 2018. All right, here's another. We do get another smiling Frank Gore. Obviously, not a lot of photos of him smiling, so this is a rare occurrence here.
So the issue here is the teeth look like he had a poor hygiene stretch. Perhaps that feels like it's reflecting getting older, but now maybe, but he's still smiling, so it can't be his Jets here, you would think. So I will go, perhaps as the tail end of his Indianapolis run. I'll say this is his 2017 last year with the Colts.
Okay, we got a 2017 here. Let's go. We got two more here. Another smiling one. Maybe we were not giving him the benefit of the doubt for being all smiles here.
Man, see, now this looks like, I mean, again, based on the neck roll there, this does kind of look like a Buffalo uniform, but I'm not confident enough to go with that. But, maybe this is a thing where Pete threw me a little trickster, as of course, as Pete sometimes does, or as I like to do to Pete on this show. So let's say this is actually also his 2019 Buffalo season.
Okay, we're gotten double dip here. See if I can throw you for the loop. And here's the final one here. This is obviously another headshot here.
Okay, so again, frown line less prominent, but also I think that at this point, Frank Gore has made a lot of money. Certainly, he's got influencer culture beautifying us all. But also the stoic face. There is no joy to be seen in this man's face. Just a pro clocking in, punching that clock, hitting the lunch pail. Frank Gore, this is his 2020 Jets season.
Okay, all right. Now I do think, if I remember correctly, you did get. I think you only got one right on the nose. Do you want me to tell you which one that is, or do you want to take a stab at now ordering these?
Oh no, let's just go. I guess honestly we have enough time where I guess we could. No, ordering them seems too tough to jump back to back though. But I'll guess which one that I got correctly. I think that it was the Buffalo one where he had like the white kind of neck roll.
You know what? It's this one that you got correctly. This is his shot from the 2020 Jets, the most recent one here.
Okay, so that, look, again, I could see that he's taken better care of himself. Again, this looks like a man, like an older gentleman who has the resources to look beautiful, and I think, but not the situation to be happy. So that's two things that come together both positively and negatively for Frank Gore.
And now I will show you the thing that inspired this segment was these two photos. So this photo is from his first year, 2005, with the 49ers. So, to do our full comparison here, we have actually I have one with both comparisons that you could see of why this is just so incredible that over the course of 15 years, basically nothing's changed. I guess a little less defined of a jawline there in his later years, but otherwise, I mean, pretty tough to tell the difference.
So here's the thing. Do you think that his head was fatter in 2005 because he's also, he's got a little bit more of the chubby cheeks, the youthful appearance there? Or is it that because he's been playing so much football that his head is actually compressed slightly from the helmet and possible concussions he's been suffering every year?
I'm not gonna comment on that.
Just throw it out there for everybody else.
I think what would the kids say? Check out this glow up for Frank Gore. Just the same photo.
All right. So what else? Which one am I the furthest off on would be the question I would have.
Yeah. So this one, what did you say this one was?
I thought that would be I think that I thought it was his Buffalo year, if I'm remembering.
So you did catch the blue, which that was a little, slip by me, but this is actually 2015 Colts era.
Oh, damn. See, I should have thought about that. Yeah, similar shades of blue. So that was me getting a little too quick for myself, but honestly, I don't think I would have gotten that either way.
Yeah, and then let me find the actual Bills one here. It was another one of the headshots. Not that one, not that one. All right, here is the Bills.
That's what I'm curious about.
So this is the Bills one there for Frank Gore from 2019. Sorry, that one.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. That checks out.
And then the award one was from 2017. He accepted the Art Rooney Sportsmanship Award. That's 2017.
How did that not come to mind right away for me? Of course, the Art Rooney Sportsmanship Award, one that I personally put on my calendar every year. He does look great there. I honestly thought that was going to be like NFL honors when he had that big campaign, but I guess that checks out. And again, great suit on Frank. You could see the glow up happening right before our eyes.
Yeah, and DFS Texas points out something I stumbled upon when I was trying to pull together headshots throughout the career, because I found one that said the Eagles, and I'm sitting here looking at his, splits and his stats and trying to find the photo. I was like, where's one from the Eagles? And then as DFS Texas says, he was on the Eagles for like 2 hours and pulled out Antonio Brown to Buffalo style, apparently.
Yeah. All right. So there we go. Any other ones that I was particularly egregiously wrong on?
Yeah, so there are a couple just from his earlier San Francisco years. Let me see here. This one is now I have too many tabs open to where this is just like a disaster.
It's almost a game within itself. Like we thought, like, oh, how are we going to do this bit? Because we both can't play the game, obviously. And in fact, the game was just Pete having to organize this while I had to actually guess.
It's honestly embarrassing how much I fumbled the organization on this. But this was a 2007 Frank Gore, and
wow.
I think you can kind of see the youth in that one. I mean, he's not smiling like that these days.
That is a very joyous smile. Like and again, that would make sense too, because that would be around the time frame that he was running for 1,700 yards. So like peak of his powers, peak of his confidence. I think that checks out.
Yeah. And then another one of the headshots was his Dolphins headshot. Yes. This one was the Dolphins headshot there from 2018. And again, like if I were to have just done this game by headshots, I think it would have been almost impossible, because at least with some of them where he's moving or whatever, you get to see a different side of him. But like the straight on Frank Gore headshot is truly a timeless artifact.
Here's the question now, because now that we're putting this all together, do we think Frank Gore maybe got a little Botox? Got that line straightened out?
He does not strike me as someone who would get Botox, but who knows? I could be wrong. This is a fun suggestion here from our guy FF Doom. He wants a side-by-side neck comparison with Davis Mills. I can do this for you. One sec. All right, here's Frank Gore, and there is Davis Mills. So from there to there, I mean, it literally has to be like double the radius of a Davis Mills neck.
Frank Gore with a real chode neck, for sure. A little short, a little thick, of course.
Who's the other one? Mike Glennon is the guy with the super skinny neck too, right?
Yeah, he's got the Toys R Us giraffe kind of neck going.
Yeah, I mean, let's see here. I mean, yeah. So Frank Gore, 2 necks. When he eats, it's for 2 necks. So congratulations to Frank Gore on a truly incredible career. Even some people in the chat were just wondering if they missed news about him re-signing with another team. And will anyone be shocked if in September Frank Gore's like, yeah, I had a change of heart. I'm bored. And I want to be the Houston Texans starting running back.
Well, he is in the Niners front office now, as we talked about there, because I think some people are confused by me saying he signed with the Niners. He signed a 1-day deal. But like, what if, let's say Trey Sermon injured again, Elijah Mitchell injured again, Frank Gore called out of the personnel department to come in. Behind that Niners offense, though, like he's probably getting you 900 yards if you gave him enough runway.
Yeah. I mean, Adrian Peterson was kind of, he obviously had, higher highs as far as his, per season rushing numbers.
And lower lows.
But it was almost like, it's like whack-a-mole with those guys. It's like right when you think Adrian Peterson's done, he pops up on another team in their leading rusher. It does feel weird to say goodbye to Frank Gore. And I'll be curious to see what he does with his time for someone who it seems like couldn't fathom doing anything else other than playing football. I assume that that's going to be a tough transition for him.
Yeah, so shout out to Frank Gore, and hopefully he has some success breeding new running backs for the San Francisco offense that I'm sure is in desperate need of them with their 7 deep rotation that they have that they could deploy at any moment. And Bolek here also implying that, Pete here saying new camera we showed in the beginning part of the show saying you're looking good. Perhaps Pete also hitting that Frank Gore Botox.
Yeah.
Botox for bros. Frank Gore's first line of medical.
Yeah, now you can see every one of my blemishes and imperfections. I did think I had a little bit of a zit here above my, and so yeah, this camera's not too forgiving. I gotta up my my routine there.
I got to
So
respect that because I go the other way where I actually slather Vaseline on the camera like Diane Sawyer back in the day to just look a little bit better for camera. A shot in hell of being on TV at some point. But Pete, I think your camera looks great. And you and Frank Gore, ageless wonders, I would say.
yeah, please. Although, wait, how old is Frank Gore?
Frank Gore is 38 now.
Okay, that's honestly incredible that Frank Gore is yeah, he's about to turn 39 in May. I'm turning 35 in June. So just 4 years separating me and Frank Gore in age.
Yeah, Frank Gore is a year older than me. So I would say that, I think we both hold youthful standards to ourselves. And I think that's where, and again, I have less concussions and my head shape has mostly retained its form. So I think that's where one category, Pete, that I can outclass Frank Gore.
Yes, and that is it. Otherwise, we are going to remain firmly outclassed by Frank Gore.
All right, so we got about 20 minutes left in the show. We might take a little bit less here, but the USFL starting up next weekend. So we promised on this show we are going to be there for the USFL. We've talked about some of the accounts out there. They're doing a great job tracking it. Cody Main, the director of niche sports over at ETR, our friend, I think we should try to get back on next week once he does a little more info digging for himself. Justin Freeman over at Run the Sims, also doing a great job putting some stuff together. The Optimizer, I know, is ready to go for the USFL. Brian Knowles over at Football Outsiders has been going team by team previewing these with precious little information. So make sure to go check out the Ramblings tab over at Football Outsiders if you want to catch up on his previews. But Pete, the USFL is coming up, and we talked about it before the show. Without salaries, I don't really know even what we can hit on at this point, besides the rule changes, besides some players to watch perhaps based on the depth charts that we know of, rumor mongering out there. But where are you with the USFL? Because I know tomorrow you said you're putting out some of your USFL previews with a little more depth for everybody out there.
Yeah, I got a bunch to get together on that, but I guess I should also mention here, I'm going to be spinning up a new YouTube channel for non-live stream content. So this will remain your home for all of the live streams, but wanted something for videos that, let's just say, I spend a little bit more time on working with an editor. And so the first one I took a crack at was a DFS and betting preview for the USFL. And so, yeah, you can keep an eye out for that either tomorrow, maybe Wednesday at the latest. But like you said, it was actually hard to put that together because you can read between the lines. There's some, you can look at coaching tendencies. You can look at how some of these players performed in other leagues, but we truly don't know until these guys hit the field. And I know with the XFL, I mean, the betting lines changed dramatically just after a week or two, because everyone right now, the Michigan Panthers have the shortest odds, and I think they literally gave them that just because they had the 101 pick and took Shea Patterson. But it's like, is Shea Patterson better than Jordan Tiamo? I don't necessarily think so, but like we won't know until we see how these teams function, and that's what makes this such the Wild West. And, we're going to see that, like you said, we don't have salaries yet. I remember with the XFL, it was like, Sammy Coates, right, was the one super familiar name to everyone. They gave him like a $9,000 salary, and then he did nothing for the rest of the league. So there's going to be so much reshuffling based on, whatever our preconceived notions are or however you want to handicap it. And I almost feel like the first week, I mean, within reason, should almost be like how they do the Pro Bowl, right? And everyone just has the same salary, or at least the position groups have the same salary, because I don't really know how we're going to have, much knowledge beyond that.
Yeah, and I remember one thing too, where I don't think there are any lines besides the features lines that we talked about for the USFL, and Pete referenced there, where it is the Michigan Panthers, coached by Jeff Fisher, #1 team overall, or according to the futures odds there. We'll see how that actually bears out on the field. But I remember with the XFL, the one thing that really stood out was there were lines that were like 57, 58, because they thought the way the XFL was going to play was going to be so much better. And the unders hit like exponentially, where it was like 45 points for most of these. The second week, I think you saw the lines start to come down, where it was like high 40s. The third week, you were seeing lines in the actual 40 range. I think even the New York team that was really bad with Matt McGloin also had some like in the 30s that were not great. So, or high 30s to be clear. But it's not looking like there's just enough information out there to do the normal process we would do for DFS. So that's something to keep in mind. And Pete, do you have any sources who've told you, by the way, because I've talked on the show, like I've had some meetings with the USFL for my day job with Champion Gaming, and I don't want to divulge too much, but it seems like there's a lot kind of going on behind the scenes there last minute, trying to get things where they need it to be. Are you hearing anything from your DFS friends out there, like when we might actually see some USFL data coming out on DraftKings or FanDuel or anywhere?
Yeah, I have no idea how close to the wire that they're going to wait. I mean, normally DraftKings does a pretty good job about getting contests up in advance. Uh, I know we had lots of roster reshuffling last week, so maybe they're waiting for kind of final lineups to be submitted. If I was a true USFL thought leader, I probably would know that date when they have to firm up their active rosters. But yeah, my just hunch would be that we get these contests up, early next week. Would just be my guess, Monday or Tuesday. So I think we're going to probably learn a lot more coming up. There was also the most recent news item I heard is that they are working in conjunction with Fox Sports to produce a 13 episode documentary that's going to air alongside the season. I mean, in a perfect world, they would have been shooting at practices and mini camps and got it out a little bit in advance, I think, to like build hype. But we're going to get, an episode a week, it sounds like, in conjunction with the season. So, I mean, as someone who I'm now almost done with season 2 of F1, Drive to Survive on Netflix. And it is insane how powerful that marketing is, where the storytelling is so good. And it's so good that I don't even think I actually have that much interest in watching live F1 races, because just the storytelling and how well they do at crafting narratives around these races is just really well done. And if this Fox Sports documentary for USFL can be, I'll say, even half as good as the F1, it will be a massive marketing win for them.
And we talked about that in our last show where when we were discussing the F1 and its rise, that we thought the USFL should be doing it. So it's good to see that they are great minds thinking alike over there. And look, I agree with you, like getting some information out in advance. I think the only information source that is like a real connective through line is RJ Young's podcast for Fox
Yeah.
Sports, where he's interviewing all the coaches. And honestly, if you have the time, like if you really want to be serious about this, I would listen to every single one of those, because there seem like there's more than enough tidbits to kind of surface and dig out of.
Yeah, I included a couple of those tidbits from his podcast in my video. A couple coaches who are basically more or less saying we are going to run the damn ball. So yeah, you could start to get a little inkling of which teams might want to play which way. On the other hand, it's also hard. It's like most of these teams are going to want to run the ball because quarterback play is such an issue. And I think most of these coaches ultimately end up getting frustrated with the capabilities of their quarterback and result to a run heavy plan just by default. So it is really hard to know right now without seeing 1 week of play, but I can't wait to at least build some lineups and see where the chips fall.
I do think that there's one quarterback, or when we get to the players to watch portion of things, that stands out to me as a guy who actually will be slinging the ball around. And I think there's two you could probably point to, but let's get to that after we talk about some of the rules changes. And let's hit them. And, if you've heard these before, we apologize, but we're trying to do the best we can to kind of establish a foundation of knowledge for the people out there who just don't want to do any prep work. And God damn it, if I don't respect that. So we're going to do the best we can to help get them the Cliff Notes version of things. Rules changes. After scoring, teams get the option of attempting a 1-point kick from the 15-yard line, a 2-point scrimmage play from the 2-yard line, or a 3-point scrimmage play from the 10-yard line. Interesting kind of wrinkle there, Pete, where it's XFL-y, not full XFL rules on that one, where you still can kick the ball, but it's a spot where you can make a 2-point game, or a 2-score game rather. 18 points would be that, instead of the NFL's version of things, where 16 points is your best chance for a 2-score game. But this spot, I feel like this is one thing which certainly is going to throw the sportsbook algorithms into a tizzy, which, again, a thing that I heard during our meetings is one thing holding back some of the data coming out there, was the sportsbooks didn't know how to properly price things because of some of the changes. But are you a fan overall of these kind of esoteric / maybe too many options for what you can do after a touchdown conversion?
Yeah, I guess that stuff isn't is interesting to me. It feels like, sorry, are you talking about overtime rules or after extra
Just
points?
the extra point.
Yeah. I to me it seems like just get rid of any kicking, and then just have it be a standardized 2-point, conversion where you have to run a play. To me, that's all you're really trying to accomplish, is just avoiding the boring kicks. I do like how they have the ability, if you want to retain possession, obviously, and the NFL, it's just an onside kick is your only option, but they have the ability to run a play that's essentially a 4th and 12 play from your own 33-yard line. If you complete the 4th and 12, you just get to continue on with the ball. So anything that's pushing these guys to be more aggressive, I think, is better. But even in the XFL, I mean, I don't know if you remember this like I do, but it seems like even with these excuses to be more aggressive, to go for 2 and 3 pointers, to go for it after scoring a touchdown, these guys will still kick. They'll
Mhm.
still punt it off. It's just like sometimes these coaches have this old school safe mentality so ingrained in them that they can't shake it even when the rules in the GTO is begging them to do so.
Yeah, and I know with our research over at Edge Sports and Football Outsiders, we have the first simulation model for the NFL that's ever existed, and it also accounts for some of the various other wrinkles that other models might not account for. Like, you probably want to go for it more often than not, and that's sort of the issue with coaches kicking and why Brandon Staley was so exalted for the analytics guys out there. Like, you want to go for it more often than not. Pete, I actually have a pitch for you, and this wasn't part of the idea. What if instead of, so like, let's say they have to go for it, they can't kick for the extra point, but instead of like it being, oh, you bump back to the 10-yard line for a 3-pointer, what if there were just areas on the field, like a rock and jock kind of thing, or in the end zone, where if you get into that part of the end zone, then you get 3 points instead? I think that'd be a lot more fun, probably a little too much of a deviation from traditional football, but that's the kind of thoughts I'd like to see.
Yeah, and I think our hope for that stuff is probably way more XFL, where they are willing to be a little bit more edgy, where you can kind of tell USFL is like, all right, we learned a little bit from the XFL. We saw what stuff got you guys excited, but we still want to be this, very familiar version of football, in a classic version of football. So I don't think the USFL is going to be where we see them really push new ideas and on the frontier of rule changes. I think they're going to end up playing it pretty tight to the vest.
And I'll keep saying, fan control football. Where are you at? Where are you guys? Where are we making the rock and jock version of this? That's what I'm wondering. But maybe we'll find out when their stuff gets going as well. Once a team has declared their choice, they can't change their extra point option. And also, if a touchdown is scored by either team, they would get the points for it. So if they get picked off and you're going for a 3-pointer, that team can return it for a 3-pointer of their own. Onside kicks come from the 25-yard line. This one's kind of interesting, Pete. So instead of onside kicking normally, you can also run a 4th and 12 play from your own 33-yard line. If your team gets the first down and keeps the ball, if it fails, the defense gets the ball. That's like gambling built into the game itself. I don't know any coach that would ever go for that, but I do like that it exists.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, depending on, those end of game situations where you're otherwise forced to do an onside kick. I mean, I would say the probability of converting a 4th and 12 is much greater than the probability of, completing an onside kick. Although maybe the data shows otherwise. I would just assume that would be easier, at least for NFL teams. I think once you factor in the quality of quarterback play and how much these teams like to run the ball, and a defense knowing that they can basically create a shell of a wall, right at the 12-yard line, maybe it is, much harder there. So I like having that. If anything, I would like if it was even a little bit easier to basically bait them into it. Maybe if it's a 4th and 7 and just be like, we are begging you to go for it at all times. And then that is a win-win, because even if they don't get it, now the other team has a short field, which would theoretically result in more scoring, which is ultimately, as fantasy players, what we want, right? We just want as many scorers as possible.
Yeah, and you're also just generating one play that's high action, which, an onside kick can be. I know some of the data that we have too suggests that if you had a 50% chance, or a player who could give you a 50% chance at an onside kick every time, that guy would be the most valuable player in the league. I think it's probably the same philosophy there. GM Shorty stuff. Why does a new league pay for kicking? Have to pay all those players for special teams so we could scream at the TV for not going for it. Actually, a pretty valid point there, both from a budgetary standpoint and a football enjoyment standpoint. Would you support Pete? And we just saw Pat McAfee at WrestleMania yesterday have a great showing. I don't want to speak ill of the kickers and my old pal Pat, who one day I'll call in that favor, get him on Splash Play. But I feel like that is something that would make a lot of sense. I would just feel bad for the kickers losing those jobs.
Right. Yeah. It's one of those tough things. We should just pull up a little bit of the clips, because I'm not like a wrestling guy. You're far more into wrestling and wrestling history than me, but like McAfee he's just electric with this stuff. It's honestly absurd how good this was. Like, it made me want to watch some more wrestling.
I mean, he was honestly one of the most over guys of the entire weekend in terms of crowd reaction. He came out to Seven Nation Army, and like the whole crowd's doing the because just a brilliant move by Pat in the first place. He said Pat pouring beer into his face. Hopefully we don't get copyright struck like we did last time we tried to review WWE clips. But if for anybody out there, Pete, not a wrestling fan, it's worth watching that Pat McAfee match, even though they had him then lose to a 80-year-old Vince McMahon, and like he should not have been doing anything, would be the first part of it. But Saturday show was really good. It was a fun one. And if for any wrestling fans out there, Cody Rhodes' debut was one of the best things I think I've seen WWE do in years.
Hey, God, I found the clip that I actually wanted to. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's. I mean, it's crazy because how many times do we see celebrities because they're successful that it'd be like oh, you get signed to a 10-day contract with the Yankees, Bill Crystal, to go and do your photo shoot, but he's legitimately good at this.
Mhm.
This is like wish fulfillment for him. I want to be, and it's like no, you actually could be in this because you fit the profile and have the talent to do it. So yeah, incredible by Pat
The
McAfee.
one limitation is that he's not like jacked to the gills, so Vince wouldn't treat him like a real wrestler. But if he
Yeah.
like put on 15 pounds of muscle and they actually treated that seriously, FF Doom a callback there. The last time we did this, they literally did kill our stream mid show. So WWE, please play nice for us this one time. We're trying to promote, trying to really give us the splash play bumps at WrestleMania.
Yeah, they'll surely demonetize it but whatever. But yeah, the last time we did it, I think it was because we were watching
Mhm.
on YouTube, and so their flag algorithm for that must be so strong that they just shut it down in real time. I'm just guessing that their algo isn't quite as good to shut down a version from Twitter, but they'll come for us. They'll be knocking
Fingers
at my door
crossed.
here. Yeah.
I mean, honestly, that's funny because like on the back end of the Splash Play account, that copyright strike is still there. Like it's still like a warning that pops up every time. Like they're like, just in case you forget. Yeah, I know it was a year ago, but play on the right side of the law. Anyway, back to the USFL. Other rules that are going to be important here. Overtime is a shootout. Each team alternates one play possessions from the 2-yard line. Each team gets up to 3 plays. The team that scores the most points wins. If team A scores in the first 2 plays and team B doesn't score, they get 4-0. The game is over. And if the game remains tied after each team runs 3 plays, overtime continues under sudden death. Again, goes in service of what we talked about, where they're trying to do the best they can to make these action-oriented plays, Pete. And I feel like in this spot, I would genuinely be excited for a USFL overtime where even if I weren't watching the game, and I think for the sake of the show, I plan on watching every single game, every single second of every game, in fact, just to make sure that we are as completionist as possible. But I feel like, Pete, the overtime rules, even if you're not watching the game, I would turn on that overtime just for the USFL style shootout. And also the fact that, hopefully they're not running a shitload of commercials in between. That would be the one hope.
Yeah, I know. I almost feel like would you, because the games will be staggered. I mean, that's good for showdown, but if you could just have it however you want, they have the 4 to 5 games a weekend. Wouldn't you just want them all kicking off at, 1 p.m. Eastern on Sunday and having a USFL Red Zone channel? Wouldn't that just be optimal? Then we would get to play classic, slate, DFS. It'd be like set to a confined time. I don't know. I think that's, if I could just choose, I think that's how I would do it.
I think the issue is like the goal of this was to create new inventory that wasn't there. So for them, that wouldn't open up enough new inventory. And I'm not saying this is not something I know from the meetings. I just know from how the media landscape is right now, like that they basically wanted to create 4 valuable pieces of real estate every weekend. And instead of like, then you're creating 1 valuable piece of real estate that's getting cut up a little bit more. But Fox and NBC are just so hard up for it that there was no other way to do it. I would agree though that like doing, 4 games on one day would be the move. Like to me, you start at 10 a.m. East Coast time or whatever, or maybe a more reasonable hour to get the West Coast people involved too. And then you go one by one, have the games go throughout that. So you can get your DFS and you have people locked in for a day. I think you're getting a little greedy pushing it for Friday to Sunday. And that's sort of the issue that I would see is you just got to get it in one day and you'll get more likely to have people engaged for that entire day.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting too, because I don't know about for you, but my DFS process for a classic slate is way different and demanding than for a showdown slate. And so, I can just come and go with showdown slates, you use the Sims, make my lineups kind of pretty easy. But a classic slate, it takes work. It stays taking up on the news. You want to be really up to, I mean, you do for a showdown slate too, but it's just like one event, one set of inactives. So I don't know. I'm torn because classic slates are more fun to build lineups for, but showdown slates require less of a time investment. And in the spring, and then when we even get into the summer, I'm probably not going to be wanting to spend, on a, warm June, Sunday afternoon, like at my computer for 4 hours. So I don't know. I'm still very curious to see how DraftKings rolls out these contests.
You don't want to late swap your Pittsburgh Maulers running backs to get an advantage.
No. Please no.
Speaking of, Pete, I think we should talk about a few players to watch, and hopefully these will get a little more sturdy as we go on. But I'm going to give full credit again. Cody Main over at ETR doing a great job. We loved having him on for the Pro Bowl. I really thought he added value to the show and gave people, myself and Pete included, a real chance to win money doing that. And some people I know did, actually. I think pretty much everybody who was watching the show who played that slate ended up profiting based on the advice Cody gave. But Cody was tweeting out some stuff about the Pittsburgh Maulers and their coach Kirby Wilson, who's made clear that he wants to run the ball. And then they cut an XFL name that people will know, Davion Smith. And I would assume that they'll prune this guy off of the actual rosters for whenever DraftKings or FanDuel or whatever puts out their stuff. But instead, it's going to be Garrett Groshek, who Wisconsin fans may know as a bootleg Peyton Hillis type, I guess would be the best way to look at it. They called him Derry Sanders. But the guy that they signed instead of Davion Smith, Madre London. Did you see this tweet from Cody, Pete?
No, I'm behind on Cody Main tweets.
It's honestly, go check out CMain7 if you want to get your XFL briefs real fast. Like I think you should read the ETR articles that'll come out. You should read the FO articles, all that. You just want to see the highlights. Go check out Cody's feed. So Madre London played in the Euro League for the Cologne Centurions. He averaged 218 rushing yards per game. That included multiple 300-yard rushing games, which you want to talk about a workhorse back, Pete. That is definitely going to be one Madre London.
That's incredible. I always love, there's always some of those. I'm trying to remember the name of the player. He went to Azusa Pacific, which is a school I know because it was in the same conference of like small California schools. We were in AIA at the time. And he ended up landing, I think it was on the Bengals, but he had like an absurd, like average 275 rushing yards a game. It's always hilarious when these guys come from the small schools and then are just so much more talented than their competition that they just literally can't be stopped. So yeah, okay. I just found that tweet from Cody. I could pull that up here. This is pretty wild. 6'1", 220, running 1,120 more yards than the next closest rusher. So just like a massive talent gap there.
And you talk about, like Football Outsiders, like we're not going to have DVOA for the USFL because you don't have the historical data to compare it to. But you're seeing there, like that's sort of telling you the story about him compared to what the league average would be, or even the top of the league, 1,120 yards more than the next guy. Like that's a gigantic gap. And this guy played at Tennessee too, in Michigan State. Madre London did. I'm curious to see what the price point is on him because he's being added late. Maybe there's some weird things with pass protection that he doesn't get the full workload. I've never seen numbers like this besides like the old Derrick Henry high school like clips that they break out. And this is a pro league. Like this isn't even like you're talking about where it's like small college ball.
Right.
Like, it's European league, but it's still like a pro league.
Yeah. We will see. We will see if it translates here, if there's a correlation to dominating European teams. Who is the guy? I even have a piece of his merch. Do you remember the guy on the Vikings? He was German. It was Bowringer. It was like Moritz Bowringer. Do you remember him?
Vaguely rings a bell, but honestly not enough.
He ended up on the Vikings and he just had like a really insane like combine numbers. Moritz Bowringer here. Yeah. He was a German professional tight end. He was drafted by the Vikings in the 6th round of the NFL draft. And he was just such this, anomaly of a guy who could come straight out of Germany to be in the league. Ultimately didn't pan out, but he was 6'5", 250. And I think they drafted him actually as a wide receiver and not even as a tight end.
Interesting. Yeah. So, I mean, look, there's going to be a lot of anomalies like that in this USFL season. Do you have anybody you want to offer up as a player to watch, or do you want to save it for those sweet clicks you're going to be getting on your videos in the coming days?
No, I can give a tease of, some of the players that I think are interesting. I think the Philadelphia Stars,
exactly. I think Brian Scott's gonna be the best QB in the league.
Yeah. And I was like, Brian Scott seems like he's going to be solid, but then even then they have Jordan Sewell, who's 6'6", and runs a 4.5 40, which is pretty impressive. And then Brennan Eagles, who's 6'3", 220 and runs a 4.55. So those are both like, that's like a Mike Evans and, an old school, like Des Bryant type build in those two receivers. So it's hard to get that kind of size and speed. Obviously they're in the USFL for a reason and not in the NFL, but that has me very intrigued what they could do with those weapons on the outside.
Well, I mean, you're talking about big-bodied guys like anybody who played the XFL, DFS before COVID shut that down. Cam Phillips was the dude who definitely was not fast enough. Actually, landed on a few NFL rosters after that as well, and he ran like a 4.5, 5.40 as well. But because he had a big body and just knew how to get into space, like he was a game breaker who had crazy big days there. And Brian Scott, very good. You know, if you watch your Brian Scott game tape, very good at throwing the back shoulder as well. So I feel like that's the kind of play where if you have the big receivers, guys who can get into space a little bit more. Brian Scott also, I thought was interesting going through that again, that RJ Young podcast on Fox Sports. They were talking to all the XFL, or all the USFL coaches, sadly not the XFL coaches, but they were talking to him, to their head coach, the Philadelphia Stars head coach, Bart Andrews, saying that he believes Brian Scott will open a lot of eyes when he takes the field. And he compared him to Steve McNair. He also compared him, granted, to less qualified players that he worked with, like Danny Werfel, Troy Smith, and Eric Crouch, but all guys who are good in college, all kind of get outside the pocket and look downfield. I feel like Brian Scott, to me, like Jordan Ta'amu, we're not going to talk about him, I think, in this list because enough people know him. He got NFL rosters for a pretty good reason after his XFL run. I feel like Brian Scott's the one name that people won't be on as much. And if he's 4K on a DFS slate, I feel like that's the kind of dude that could actually make a difference and maybe throw for like 300, 400 yards.
Yeah, here was another nugget I unearthed about Brian Scott. He once beat out former NFL quarterback, you might remember, Zach Mettenberger, for a starting job in the spring league. So, I mean, this guy has already shown that he can beat out, NFL level talent to be the quarterback. So that's all I needed to hear about Brian Scott.
I'll also throw in a name here, another running back for you, of course, of the Splash Play official team, the New Orleans Breakers. TJ Logan, recruited by Larry Fedora to UNC when he was there. Now he's on the same team as him. They do have another running back in that stable of Larry Rose, but TJ Logan, a guy who ran for over 3,000 yards in high school, was a highly recruited prospect. I saw on the podcast with RJ Young, Fedora was talking about just how his ability just to get both in the rushing game as well as the passing game. And I feel like that's something that could benefit pretty well. So TJ Logan to me is another name to look out for. Pete, anybody else that you want to throw into the mix here that you feel confident enough to throw into the mix, I guess is the bigger question.
GM Shorty says, hand in the dirt USFL takes thin part of the sports here. Hey guys, we spent 20 minutes guessing what year certain photos were of Frank Gore from his career. So to answer your question, yes, GM Shorty, it is the thin part of the sports year.
We thrive in the esoteric. That is what this show is about more than anything.
Yeah, but look, man, when you're at the bar this weekend and your buddies are all talking about the USFL, we are equipping you with this knowledge to be a thought leader in this space. And so you might not think that this information is going to come in handy, but it will. And you'll be the stud of your friend group because of it.
You got anybody else? Because I got one more guy I would throw out with some confidence.
I'm gonna keep. I don't want to give up too much of mine. My takes are going to be in my video, so you can give out yours. I got to leave a little tease for the people.
All right, well, fair enough. So I'll give one more guy, and of course, we are going to dig in deeper next week. Hopefully, get a little more news out there. Will be the hope. Maybe it's some actual depth charts. We'll find out. Houston Gamblers, so a team coached by Kevin Sumlin, a man who has had a lot of good spread offense throughout the college years. In this spot, JoJo Ward is the fastest guy on this team and might be one of the fastest guys in the league. Of 4.40 time out of Hawaii. Our guy Brian Knowles on Football Outsiders pointed him out, and it jumped out to me because spread offenses, we know that's actually what happened with the Houston Roughnecks offense back when they were in the XFL. They were a spread / run and gun with June Jones. Similar principles to the Kevin Sumlin offense, and JoJo Ward running out of the slot, a fast guy, a small guy too. They don't really have good outside receivers, so JoJo Ward, a powerful name, 8 letters, Pete, and I think could be the dude that actually could be a game breaker in a league like the USFL, where you're just not going to have that back end speed you have in the NFL that would make a guy like JoJo Ward completely unusable.
Yeah, and they also have Isaiah Zuber, who bounced around on the Patriots for a little bit. So yeah, and I mean that's the team I'm ultimately most excited about. Actually, I would say the Bandits are probably the team just because of Ta'amu. But I think I just want the Gamblers to be good because they have the best name in the league.
I would say for me, I think Philadelphia is going to be the team to watch overall for passing offense, but I think stacking up Houston's going to have some appeal no matter what guys are there. I think T.O. Redding's another guy played in the XFL, had 1 or 2 really good games for New York, and then kind of fell off for whatever reason. I think they just kind of went to other targets and also were really bad at QB play that year. But T.O. Redding's another guy that I think could have some value, but I think, there's some offenses that are a little more predisposed to pass. try to lean on those guys, and we'll hopefully know some of the chalkier running backs. And I'm going to throw in one more player, a QB, who apparently could have the best shot to actually start out of all the number 2 drafted QBs. Jamar Smith is a guy who played for Skip Holtz, can run. Football Outsiders, again, believes that he has the best chance to be the second QB drafted who could start. And I think that's the starter there is Alex McGough, who actually was drafted by the Seahawks, has a good pedigree, but has shown some inability to pick up the playbooks in the NFL level. Jamar Smith can run, can give you that double-tiered value where a lot of people will look to Jordan Ta'amu for that stuff. Jamar Smith could be a guy that offers some value. And I think, Pete, we did this bit on the show, but literally I could say any other player name. Like I can make up a name right now, complete creative player mode, and give a credible argument for it. And I feel like people would go like, oh, why is this guy not on the, why is he not on the DFS slate? And I think that's where we are with the USFL knowledge right now.
Yeah, it's going to be the first week or so is going to be a shit show, but it's going to be a wonderful shit show. And yeah, I can't wait for it.
And we will be there for it, and we're going to do some lineups on the show. We're going to give our picks. We're going to do ride or dies for the USFL. We are doing it all. But GM Shorty stuff, I think, closing us out pretty well. Spags and I will be at home with the kids, wondering why we know so much about JoJo Ward. Luka got his first WrestleMania. I'm excited for him to get his first USFL slate. I think this is an important run to be having a youth in your life.
Yeah, I mean, what do they say? You always remember your first USFL slate. And I wasn't old enough, to enjoy the first round of USFL. But I'm not going to miss this one.
Our guy Josh also said, are you guys going to be the thought leaders of doing the first season-long live on your show? I wish that we could do a USFL season-long. Like I was quietly hoping Underdog would find a way to do a best ball for it. I would gladly be there. The issue is like there's no software that exists that's doing it. And that's really the only limitation, Pete, is our imagination.
Yeah, I'm sure that would have been, we sometimes forget we are in a bubble as far as our appetite for some of this stuff, and probably not the best use of Underdog's time to spin up a database in a draft for USFL. But who knows if the interest is there in this, sport, continues to grow. I really think if it weren't for the pandemic and weren't for the XFL having to shutter, like I think this season would have been like a moment they could have built on their inaugural season last year's before it got canceled. And then heading into this year could have been really big, I think. And now we kind of have to start from square one. So maybe in a year or two, this spring league football will get to a point where the sites are willing to start to provide more of that.
And I would say if there were an Underdog best ball league for USFL, Madre London's ADP is too low because of him joining late in camp. If you have a guy who's running for literal video game numbers, pick him up and give him a shot would be my suggestion there. But we will be digging more into this in coming weeks. Friday, of course, we'll be back on the Underdog NFL best ball streets, do another Superflex draft. I think we have some NFL draft content coming up as well on this channel. So make sure you are staying tuned. Of course, go to footballoutsiders.com/subscribe, get FO Plus in your life, or just go check out some articles on the homepage. Again, lots of great stuff there. If you are a football fan, and I presume you are watching this show, make sure to go check out the stuff they're doing, because it's just information accumulation in the offseason is a really underrated part, I think, of what it means to be profitable in football, and just, to give yourself the best leg forward as the industry gets smarter year to year. So go check stuff out on here. Keep watching what Pete's doing. Keep watching the ship chasings of the world as well, because there's a lot of great people doing interesting stuff around football, even though the games are not going on. But Pete, any plugs for you here before we call it quits and come back on Friday at 2:30 Eastern?
Nope. No plug. Just keep an eye out. I'll probably post the link to that new channel in that video coming soon. Definitely will appreciate you guys subscribing over there as well. So keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, I'll be subscribing and liking, and I'll be following at Peter Overzet on Twitter to see when that comes out. You should too. Make sure to follow at Chris Spags. Follow at Splash Play Pod as well. We're still following back everybody on there. So make sure if you want to get a free follower and you feel like you're a part of the community, I give people likes too, because that's how much I care. So go follow us on Twitter, on Instagram, at Splash Play Pod. We'll be back Friday at 2:30. So enjoy your weeks, guys, and see you soon.